Well, kia ora koutou everyone, welcome along to our meeting for Wednesday, the 25th of May 2022. If you'd like to stand with me for karakia and council affirmation. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, ihi aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei maurora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. So the plan for this meeting is that we will meet through till 3 o'clock today, and if we still have further things to discuss or agenda items that haven't been covered, we'll adjourn for afternoon tea at that point. It also coincides with the Tai Tuara Awards, of which we are in, and so there'll be some staff in one of the council rooms next door to us that will be focusing on thinking about how we might receive that award should we be successful, and yeah, we'll let you know whether that happens at sometime after 3 o'clock. The agenda's been circulated. We're all here and present today, so there's no apologies today. No identification of any extraordinary business that I've received.
No, it does not, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any conflicts of interest that people have that are not already captured on the interest register? None. There's no public forum today, and so we move to the confirmation of minutes. It's item 6. We have a mover and a seconder for those minutes.
Also move, notice that I've sent through a small correction on page 9 with just a couple of words that we're missing.
Cool, thanks Mark. Moved by Mark, seconded Melton. Any further discussion on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. We have the matters under investigation are on page 13. So there's 4 items there. One is on our agenda today around the township signage and 3 others to come. Does that cover everything that people had expected to be on matters under investigation from previous meetings? Grant?
The request for the CE to correspond with Tangata Arawai around chlorination.
I'll add that to the list so that it's captured there. Thanks, Grant.
I think there was also included the require and provide for the advice, whether that was actually legally required, whether it was just a provision or whether it was implementation.
Right, David, you're clear what that request is?
Yeah, I am, and I will provide a report to councillors for your information. I have met with the CE of Tangata Arawai last Wednesday, and also had 2 subsequent meetings with associates of his talking about chlorination and the issue of funding under the new models from the 1st of July 2024. So I'll forward that information.
Great, thank you. Before we move to the Chief Executive's report, I'll just say at the start, it's nice that we can all be back in the room. Sorry I wasn't able to be with you last time, and thank you to Malcolm stepping in to chair the meeting, much appreciated. And in the intervening couple of weeks, I've had 2 drop-in sort of coffee and chat sessions with the Mayor, both Leaston and in Lincoln yesterday. And the conversations were quite varied, and the matters that people wanted to raise and included things around development of land, which has received a lot of press recently, but we also touched on things like the streetscapes in town centres. We talked about road safety in our rural intersections and the need for or the perceived need for lighting in rural intersections, and things of concern that were in our community. Some things you sort of expected to hear, and other things that people just wanted to talk about. So where there were matters that required further council engagement or involvement, I have encouraged them to enter into the processes that we already have for that, and the rest were just for my information, or we'll come back through perhaps future public forums when council are making decisions on some of the development matters that sit in front of us. So David, we'll hand to you and your Chief Executive's report. It's on page 15 of today's agenda. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and I echo your comments. It is great to be back in the chambers again today. So my report is largely for information only. Firstly, acknowledge the very hard work of our staff who have secured more funding from the Tourism Infrastructure Fund for 4 sites. The first one is additional public toilet on the highway side of West Melton Reserve. Second one is a dump station in Wollaston. Thirdly, upgrades of the Liffey public toilets in Lincoln. And fourth, adding a toilet in the Sheffield domain on State Highway 73. Work is due to start on those projects very shortly, and in each case will be finished by the end of October. And again, just want to acknowledge staff. We've been incredibly successful through this fund. A lot of good hard work is going through. The Darfield to Kuwi pipeline at the time of writing this report was 85% complete. It's now further down the track than that. Key crossings of State Highway 1 and the railway are nearing completion, particularly around Burnham Road. The pipeline project is on track to be completed by June of 2022. Now, we have been invited for a site visit by the contractor next Wednesday. Bus has been booked, leaving here at 8:45 a.m, returning no later than 10:30, because of course we've got a briefing meeting starting at 11. During the course of today, so I've heard so far from councillors Lemon, McGuinness, Gallagher and Bland. If you're not on that list, can you either send me an email or a text just to confirm your availability for that trip? Speaking of Cord, very, very proud to be associated with this company who have won 2 awards at the council-controlled Canterbury Awards recently. They secured a Civil Construction Canterbury Contractor of the Year Supreme Award, and they also scooped up the CCNZ Canterbury Environmental Award in that case for the 2nd year in succession. And it recognises the high quality of their work and its delivery of projects across a wide range of the community in the South Island. So very, very proud. And we've got Cord coming to talk to council on Wednesday, the 15th of June. So again, we'll have the opportunity to formally recognise that with them. Mr. Mayor, the last piece of information I put on my report is really for the members of the community who may be interested in putting forward their nomination for the local government elections in October of this year. Just give some background around, firstly, the makeup of local government nationally, some of the roles and responsibilities of local government. But the key pieces of information are firstly that I will be holding some candidate pre-election meetings across the district. So they are on the 28th of June in West Melton, 29th of June, Darfield, 30th of June here in Rolleston, 5th of July in Leaston. All start at 7 o'clock. The meetings, they generally take about an hour, led by myself with assistance from key staff, and just really focus on what it's like to be a councillor, those questions, you know, in terms of commitment and benefit to the community. So look forward to meeting anybody that's interested in those. And finally, just a reminder that nominations for this year's election open on the 15th of July and close on the 12th of August. So happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. And one of the other great things that's happened in the last 10 days, it's neither of us have mentioned so far, is just the turf opening, which I know many of you were at, but just wanted to highlight the great work of our staff, Douglas and your team for doing that, and the long-term plan work that happened last year. Kelvin and your team around the funding of making that all work. The event itself, in some ways it's another sports field, but in lots, what I felt when I was there was that this is really the icing on the cake of a great district that's able to deliver really quality infrastructure for our community to be able to enjoy, not just those that play those sports, but those that want to be in a community where there's activity happening, where we create spaces for people to gather together, and where, if council was in a strong position, which we are to be able to do this stuff, that's one thing, but actually we've got a community that's in a really strong place as well, with clubs that are able to lean into this type of work. And just the fortunate situation that we find ourselves in Selwyn, where lots of hard work is paying off and being able to deliver things for our community. So David, to you and the staff that have done that, thank you very much. And it was a major project over the last 12 months that is now being delivered and is across the line. Shane.
Ai, tēnā rā tātou katoa, tēnā mihi ana ki a koutou kaimahi o Kaikuna Hira, rohi o wai kirikiri, tēnā koe Sam, tēnā koe o kaiwhakahaere. David, thank you very much for your report, David, and congratulations to Cord in winning the Civil Construction New Zealand Canterbury Awards this year. Incredible feat in such unpredictable circumstances. Congratulations to the council in being successful in securing more TIF funding. Absolutely fantastic. And I just wanted to remind council that we did have some pretty impassioned submissions from the Kuwi residents, in particular the fuel station there, hoping that at some stage they may get a toilet on the state highway there as well. Just the upcoming elections, where can candidates find the attachment here, David, the local changemaker candidates guide, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a link through the report, Councillor Shane. But anybody that's inquiring, my advice would be in the first instance, ask them to call me direct and provide, we've got a wealth of information that we can share with potential candidates.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Sophie.
Yeah, just wanted to, sorry, something else that's happened in very recent days was an award to Tokahapai, the Health Hub, which we haven't mentioned yet. So that was another pretty awesome achievement, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it bustling with people very soon.
Yeah, and potential awards, Te Rātia, I believe, is shortlisted in an architect's award ceremony, which is on the 15th. So it's another potential award there, and even being shortlisted is recognition in itself to the quality of the design and build.
Mover and seconder for David's report. Moved Sophie, seconded Bob. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. Next item is on tab 8, page 40, bilingual signage.
So this is an update from me, Mr. Mayor, on a matter under investigation. So we budgeted $120,000 in our LTP for this work initially for 24-25. We are proposing to bring that funding through to 22-23. And this update report presumes that that will in fact happen. And the key reference is the last paragraph on page 41 of the agenda, assuming that that money is carried forward. Staff will form a project team containing key staff from transportation and communications, and they'll be responsible for scoping, developing, and that's a stock take of current signage, understanding of Waka Kotahi requirements, which I've included in this report as well, driver safety, crucial conversations with Taumutu Runanga regarding place names, designs, etc. And we will be bringing a report back to council by February of 23, so that the next steps can be incorporated into the draft annual plan for 23-24. So purpose is to say we're on the way.
I'm just a little bit confused. We're bringing the funding forward to 22-23, but the final paragraph says that a report we brought to council in February 23, so implementation can be included in 23-24.
Yep.
annual plan.
spending the funding doing the feasibility
So the $120,000 for feasibility studies
up to. Could be.
Wow.
seems an awful lot of money, but okay, well, we can have that discussion in our deliberations on the annual plan.
Happy to do that.
Sorry, my question was on the same issue as well. I was just clarifying what the 120,000 budget was going to be spent on, including the signs, but obviously it's not.
And I will provide details for that for councillors.
Thank you. Moving a seconder for the report. Malcolm, thank you. Seconded to Nicole. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Next one is the activity group reports update. This paper follows the decisions made at the start of the year to think about some of the work that we needed to focus on this year, and I want to thank councillors involved for the work that they have done in those spaces. David, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I just want to acknowledge the work of the management team and also those councillors who have followed up on the request from you and I, Mr. Mayor, at the retreat in late January. Each one progress, and that is detailed in the report. And the groups are continuing to meet, and obviously it's part of our strategic approach going forward.
Thank you. Deborah.
Thank you. Can I please ask that the report discussing the proposed Prebleton Hall actually be sent to the Hall Committee? It's a relatively new committee that's been elected with regards to that committee, and I don't think they are aware of all the background with regards to what was written in this report. So it would be really helpful if they could have just a copy of that report sent to them. That'd be appreciated.
Thank you. Mover and seconded to receive this report. Great. Sorry, I didn't see any names.
No, I didn't realise. I thought we were
Great. Murray, Shane, and Grant.
Yeah.
Well, Grant, you Google.
You in front of me, Murray.
Okay. I suspect we're going to say similar things. Just with respect to the investment, David, and understand some of this may be commercially sensitive, so that they're light on detail, but we've had considerably more discussion than is contained in here, and I just wonder if it'd be beneficial if Kelvin would just update considerable work into that, and would appreciate what he can say as part of that, because one of the key things to come out of this, the discussions we held, particularly around the three waters, is securing, we've mentioned this around the table before, but securing those land parcels that should not be transferred across, to ensure that that does become part of our investment portfolio. There's other items as well, but I'll defer that until if Kelvin's able to speak.
You're following on. I agree, and I think just sort of as a general catch-all we're looking forward to producing a straw man, which we can bring to council, and Kelvin's underway on that. I guess I can't let this opportunity pass without reflecting that we've really, 3 years we've had no progress here, and the lack of urgency is disturbing, and it worries me. And I think particularly around, I think we mentioned within the group, the actual corralling of the investments and actually holding them into a pen or a circle that we can actually keep them together. And we're still seeing, and even in today's agenda, proceeds from investments or potential investments being put into operational expenditure. And to me, it's a real fail that we have not at least circled these investments and funds and put them into a holding pattern until we decide where we go. I don't think we should be using our investments as OPEX. And just, this is another thing that's in the, particularly about the Leaston project. I see there that iwi have gifted us two names. I want to signal early on the potential problem with Waihora. It's going to create confusion, particularly around, most people in Selwyn associate Waihora with Taitapu. So if we started promoting another name for Leaston, which is totally at odds with what the local knowledge is, I think it's not going to work. So maybe it's right now, we're at this early stage, let's revisit it now and think, is this going to work in the long term?
Well, thanks, Grant.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I've only got one attachment here, and I just figured that we were going to go around the room and have a bit of a discussion on each of the each of the working groups. But I guess I'd just like to say thank you very much to Denise and Bob and and Douglas for being a part of the council's facility activity report. And I think a joined up approach and discussions with the full community and the various community interests will be a good thing, including the rugby club, and also the gifting of the two names from the Runanga. I guess at some point they're being used as a framework at this stage, and at some point they'll be discussed further with the community and the community groups as to where those possible names will land in terms of the name of the building or the project itself, but just to ensure that the communication is open and free, and that everyone is involved in the conversation. And I congratulate you on the PDD format. I think that's a wonderful way forward. And thank you very much for being a part of that, and to Bob as well. Thank you. I just had a couple of questions on number 0.3 and 0.4, and wondered if there's any feedback from various councillors on those working groups, 3 being iwi relations activity report and 4 Three Waters activity report, because as a council we moved a resolution some time ago, and that's a resolution that we moved as a council. And we've received a number of letters from the community, and I just wanted to acknowledge the letters from our community and constituents around the concern about no consultation. And David, obviously we've had communication around when that should happen. If this is not a prime opportunity to at least fill in our constituents and our community on where we are at the moment, I would really appreciate that correspondence, an update, and if there's any opportunity for our constituents to be involved at any point, I would really welcome that. I feel kind of a meat in the sandwich here, where we're being top-down approach, and then being ultimately responsible to those that have put us here to look and protect their asset as prudent stewards of their dollar. But firstly, back to the iwi relations, I just wanted to get a better understanding on perhaps some of the discussions that have happened so far, the long-term plan commitment that we've made to our local runanga, Te Taumatu, Ngai Te Rua Hiki Hiki, to provide them with funds on a yearly or termly basis, and where those conversations are at the moment. So any one of those questions, really, I'd really appreciate if anybody can expand on that.
We have had a response from the Runanga Shane in terms of how the funds are going to be used. So what I'll do is I'll circulate a copy of that letter around to everybody. We had our most recent meeting with the Taumutu executive on 16th of May. The key things we talked about firstly were the relationship agreement that we discussed in a workshop in terms of council response to that and the next steps, which are that we're proposing to bring that back for sign off by the end of July of this year. Talked about Three Waters, and we advised that our issue is about the best Three Waters service for the residents of Selwyn, and we acknowledged firstly decisions that council had made on, I think it was the council meeting of the 11th of May, or maybe one of the earlier ones, where there was some publicity followed that. And the next steps, of course, are legislation which is proposed to go to the House. Latest information is either late June or early July. We talked about a scheduled Marae visit, which is provisionally going to be 30 November 2022. Talked about Greater Christchurch Partnership and some of the crossover roles and responsibilities that will potentially come out of that. Better Off support package, where we will be discussing our suggestions with local iwi as well. And we acknowledge the gifting of names for the hospital that you referred to. Interest in working alongside the Runanga over a health project, which again will be discussed by the working groups. And finally, we talked about water chlorination outcomes.
Thank you very much.
Where that might be. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Was there anything else you or Malcolm wanted to add to that? Thanks for that, David. That was good.
Well, thank you very much, David. I do appreciate your answer. I guess one of the key pieces there is that we are consulting a number of people, but the people that we aren't are the ones that we've made the commitment to at the start to consult with, and that's the public. And I made that quite clear in the speech that I made here earlier when we were having the discussion. We're consulting iwi, yes, and that's part of the requirements of receiving of the better off funding. And sorry, but what ultimately it should be the public that decides what that's used for. I know it's a little way down the track, but if the discussions are being had, there's a lot of uncertainty around where we sit at the moment, and it's almost a done deal in the public size, and that's what I'm hearing from constituents out there. So what I'm asking is when the public going to be able to participate?
Sorry, what subject are you talking about?
Both the better off funding and Three Waters.
Well, the better off funding is being discussed by council at its briefing meeting next Wednesday.
Okay.
And Three Waters, we did have a fairly detailed discussion at a council meeting. It was 2 meetings back.
Yes.
Where we passed some resolutions. And as I say, we can't move beyond that now until we know what the legislation actually says and what it proposes.
And I can understand the difficult position that we sit in too, David, but what I'm hoping for is an update that we can give to our constituents on where we are sitting at the moment. I think the gap between what they know and what they're hearing and all that type of stuff is incoherent. And perhaps other people are hearing other things, but I would like to hear from others out there. I met with one of the submitters of the letters this morning, a chap called John Oakley from out at Rakaia there. I wanted to talk to him face to face and understand his concerns. So I sat with him and had a coffee this morning, and there's just no visibility over what's happening and what he's hearing from the media and what's circulating locally from everybody. There's a disconnection there. So if there's an update we can put out there to say that this is where it sits at the moment, we're unsure, and I guess that's where it's kind of sitting at the moment, but this needs some substantive support for our residents to understand where we sit at the moment, because the conversations are barreling along, but then they don't seem to be being part of it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. I think the update, there's nothing to update. So until we get to the legislation, which I imagine the first reading is going to be in the next few weeks, at what point we can think about what we want to feed into our own select committee submission and what that needs to be, what the community would like us to say, and also how we support our community to have their say into that process. So I would like to think that we would take a role that helps them enter into the process rather than disempowering them and us just taking on that role on their behalf. So it needs to be both ends. So once we know what the legislation is going to look like, because it will have had its first reading, then we can take what those next steps are. Thanks. I'll just get Kelvin to comment on the things Grant raised before, and then we'll just continue with this discussion. Kelvin?
Sure, thanks. There's been a good discussion. We had a really good in-depth discussion and quite a bit of planning around where we need to head, but Grant made a very good comment around how the investments are sitting within our books effectively and where they sit, and tidying that up is pretty critical. Within the paper there, you saw a group of purposes for our investments. So we're probably formed by the fact that we think the investment's all about yield. It's actually more than that around those investments, and making sure that we've got the right criteria for assessing the success or not of an investment, or whether we should go into an investment is pretty critical. So work's going ahead on building that up. Putting things into looking at options for vehicles, if we need vehicles to hold investments, and really then going back and actually taking a look back and say, where do we think we are currently with what we've got on our books? Are they meeting our needs? What's our strategy around hold or otherwise? And being able to present that back to the council at some point. It will probably be to the new council, given timing to put all that together.
Just with regards to the Three Waters, because it's been broken up into the urban and the rural, most of the emails that I'm receiving are from the rural community, and there is a lack of knowledge, understanding, information being published, I guess, from central government with the management of the rural water sector. And it's quite easy to be watching television and actually seeing, you know, some of the counter, I'll say anti-farming lobby with regards to management of water from some of the NGO adverts that is actually causing some discord, to be honest, with the rural community saying, well, we're next. So what are our options? What's going to happen to us? You know, how are we going to be managed through the Three Waters reform with regards to our water? And that goes right down to water takes as well. So there's a bigger picture in the background here that is being, you know, an area of concern.
Thank you, Deborah. Right.
Thank you, Sam, for the opportunity. I'm sorry to have a second go, but I just want to highlight the importance of what we're talking about with our investments, particularly it's coming up in the next paper, but you know, we had investment income of nearly 9 million and our general rate take is 20. So you're talking possibly a 50% rate increase if we didn't have this investment income in our general rate take. So this is really important for our ratepayers that we do get this done and quickly, because it is fundamental to our business. Just two other things quickly. The PDD for Leaston, it says it builds on our experience from other communities. And I think the fact that it excludes those sporting clubs is perhaps unfortunate, because the experience from our communities that were involved in these processes was, particularly at Taitapu, was how brilliant it worked out for them. And if you reflect on Lincoln, how there's a real wistful looking back in the rearview mirror going, gee, I wish we'd taken part in the LEC model when we had the opportunity around the sports clubs. So I encourage those people to be included in the PDD. And lastly, want to ask the Shane raised about the Three Waters reform in our committee that did their. How did Tamutu know our position? We were quite clear on their position from their letters they sent to us. Did that committee meet with Tamutu and tell Tamutu what our position was? Because I've got no experience of sitting here as a councillor and explaining to Tamutu what my position was or what the council's position was on Three Waters. So I'm just unsure as to how our iwi partners know what our council's position was, unless that committee corresponded with them. Did they talk to them on our behalf, or can someone enlighten me?
Yeah, David and I had met with Tamutu ahead of our meeting with them, knowing that the issue of water was high on their radar and agenda, and knowing that Tahu had a long input into collaborating with the Canterbury mayors around thinking what do we need to do going forward. So they were aware of the discussions that had happened up to that point, and they knew that we had not taken a position on it because we hadn't. So whether it was you were talking to C4LD and we didn't
I'm talking about what's in the best interest of Selwyn, and I think we never had that discussion with our iwi partners before they holus bolus got in behind the government's disposition. And you know, as I said, the co-governance or the MOU with our iwi partners failed at the first hurdle because we never had that discussion. And I don't regard you having a conversation, Mr. Mayor, with our iwi partners as a council discussion. You may, but I don't.
And we didn't have the MOU at that time. So I think this is what this whole, the energy behind having an MOU is to have a more standardised way of communication between Tamutu and ourselves, so that there is broader engagement on those discussions, and it does go beyond just, which at the moment has been the chief executive and myself with the deputy mayor sometimes. Now we've got this new group, which Mark has been in attendance in the last few meetings, and Shane, you've attended meetings over the last 2.5 years. And so the difference now is saying we would like to formalise what that looks like, and I think that's a key part of the change. Yeah. Sophie.
Yeah, I'm just picking up from what Deborah was saying, and also, yes, I've been having emails as well, obviously. From talking to people who are on private bores and septic tanks and everything, there is definitely still that disconnect of understanding what Three Waters means for them. I note that the Rural Supplies Working Group report's due fairly soon. Just thinking that might be a good opportunity to get some more clarity for people who think they might be captured by it, but actually aren't, and get some more communication out around then when it comes out. Thanks.
Yeah, that's through you, Mr. Mayor. That is the key to the issue. We are, like everybody else, waiting for that report. That's going to talk about future ownership. That's going to talk about required investment to bring the schemes up to whatever the standard is going to be. And it's also going to talk about the time frame for the transition to be able to do that. So once that's received, it will be shared. But at this stage, we have absolutely nothing to share with anybody.
And the update from that rural supplies that we received was at the Zone 5 and 6 meeting recently, was that there's a number of councils who have rural supplies in the same within their district to the same scale that we have, but they're not run by council. And so the difference for us was they were council-run supplies, and so the transition to Three Waters, they get included in that conversation because they're run by council. For other districts, they're not run by council, and so there's this concern around the expertise and support that council provides should they stay separate from this reform process. So a lot of the discussions don't fit the Selwyn model, but just because of the way that we made decisions, 6 years ago now, around that change. Thank you for the discussion on those reports. Is there anything else that hasn't been raised that people would like to touch on? No, look forward to receiving the next round of updates and that investment report particularly. Grant, thanks for highlighting some of the urgency that's still required there. Mover and seconder for the report. Malcolm, thank you. And Nicole, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Declare it carried. The next is our acquisition of land required for Stage 2 Prebbleton intersection upgrades under the Public Works Act 81, page 56. Mark, was it you? Melky and Mark, moved and second.
I just wanted to speak to it.
You can.
Yeah, I'd like to move this. It's very important that we get on with this project every day that goes past, particularly as we go into winter. There's more and more traffic on the road. The danger of those intersections is large. They are very tricky to negotiate. Great bit of work going on. Thank you, staff, for the work you're doing along the pathway. I know from the work you've done in the previous projects, dealing with multiple landowners is not easy. So go well with good speed. Thank you.
Thank you. Douglas, do the same thing about the report?
Yeah, just highlight, as with the Gregor presentation this morning on other matters around intersections, probably the key to making sure, as Councillor Lyles identified, is being able to clearly state that the design that we're looking at is the best design. And one of the things we're seeing early on is there is obviously, and rightfully so, we're going to push back on what have you looked at other design issues. So we just need to make sure we explore those correctly. I know some will say, well, that will take too long and maybe we don't need to do that. But actually, it's just the genuineness of engaging on that. So that is something we'll be looking at, and we'll just maybe back with you just to bounce a couple of designs round if we see that's needed. The key here is to make sure that we resolve the issues as expediently as we can, but as fairly and reasonably as we can as we work through the process. So we've demonstrated that well in the previous two intersections. We just need to make sure we do the same here for these sections as well.
Thank you. Grant.
I want to support Councillor Lyle on the urgency of this. He's identified it being a local, and it's in my ward as well. Also want to commend the staff for the foresight in purchasing the affected properties when they had the opportunity. I think that was diligent and well done, and has proven to be been really advantageous to the council. So that was a real positive for the council staff. Thank you for doing that. But want to just focus on Douglas's comments about perhaps taking a pause and referencing the NZTA discussion we had this morning, that there is a wider picture here, which we're doing in isolation in some respects. I know Andrew and his team are working as hard as they can to get these improvements, but as fast as they're running, they're not going fast enough because the changes are overtaking our team. And whether there's an opportunity, I think the discussion we had just sort of socially was, should we engage someone who's completely divorced from NZTA or outside the loop, who's not got a view which is predetermined from experience, and that's just the nature of being in the forest sometimes, will we actually get someone, even an Australian consultant, to actually look at our transport systems in the east of Selwyn and say, is this the best outcome for a district that is growing at a fantastic speed? Because it worries me that we are reactively trying to catch up to our development, where we really almost need a sea change in our approach to it. And I would promote that if there's an opportunity to move from a governance level to us to follow that pathway, I would move that today. I don't know what the rest of the support is, but it just seems to me that we're always behind, particularly on the east.
Grant, thanks for raising. I think the time to talk through that would be at a transportation report when that's on the table, and then to seek a report back to us around what that might look like, what the cost would be involved, and so we could all make an informed decision around what that looks like. So, yeah, if that's the direction, let's just wait for the transportation report if that works for you.
Yeah, maybe it's just a heads up for the staff that they might want to just quietly find out what that might cost, so they've got a reference point. I mean, potentially 120,000 on signs might be better spent on that.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Got our finance reports up next. First one of these on our council agenda for a wee while, so great to have it here in front of us all. And Kelvin, you're going to come to, are you moving to the front? Is that right? Yeah, come and join in.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, as Sam said, this is the first time it's been here for a bit. It's been heading to the Audit and Risk Committee. So we have no Audit and Risk Committee, but I do intend to have a more summarised version come to council on a more regular basis. So this report is for the period 1 July 2021 to 31 March 2022. So the key highlights to look at here: surplus before depreciation and amortisation, 26 million above what we had planned for, and largely that is being driven through revenue items, which I'll discuss shortly. Consenting, so as the big negative there, we're all aware of the processing time on that, but the good point on this here, it is improving and is lifting. So we're seeing improvements each month now, which is really great to see. Just on consenting, we're 11% higher than where we were last year on building consents. So that's sort of seeing this growth in the district really continue at pace. Facility fees and charges, you can see the swimming line there with the aquatic centre taking a bit of a tick up. Now we're back in full noise, and the impacts of COVID sort of falling off somewhat. Moving to page 71, looking at the council's income to start with, so 35.48 ahead of the budget. Big drivers there are our development contributions, 20.7 up, and that is just really a factor of the growth we're seeing in the district. We typically take a conservative approach there on those. We'd sooner be short on the revenue side of things than all of a sudden be in a bind where we don't have enough in the budget. Rates, as you'd expect with a little bit of growth in the district, up on budget numbers. And we received a few subsidies and grants, largest being the Darfield pipeline grant from the Crown. And we received subsidies around unbudgeted flood claims early in the year. And fees and charges are making away nicely there. If we move to the other side on the expenditure, the opposite of the fees, the subsidies that are coming in around flooding, we've had the cost of the floods going out, and we have a shortfall on that of around about 3.7. Refuge charges are a little higher, and this was largely driven by the seasonal impact where we had wet, hot conditions promoting growth. Good for those out there farming and land, but not so good for those mowing their lawns and having to dispose of waste. Consulting fees, unfavourable to budget, but that is really supporting the effort that goes in Tim's group around processing of consents. So that is all recovered back through the consenting costs. The Five Waters overspend 1.4. A large part of that is to do with the new cord contract, which was signed post-budget at a rate higher than what was in the LTP. Moving on to the next page, 73, and this is just looking at the surpluses and deficits by each group. As Grant had pointed out in that previous conversation around investments, there's a couple of investments which flow through the community services and facilities line. This is an historic way they've been put in there, and we'll look to resolve where investments end up in the future so that we have them in a nice tight spot. As I said before, around transport, the negative variance there is an association with flood claims. Yeah, and internal services down the bottom again, this is a result of where things are held within budgets. A large part of that is to do with development contributions coming in for reserves. So there's a tidy up required there also. Moving across to capital expenditure, which is on page 75, I think. I've lost my page numbers. Tricky one here, whether you have this in green or red. I tend to go down red because we've budgeted for these numbers and we haven't gone out and spent it. So we're running significantly lower than where we anticipated to be by this point. The exercise around carry forwards is going on at the moment as we go through the budget process, and that will range between 40 and 50 million, so a large sum that will be carried forward once more. Balance sheet, not much to report here. Our balance sheet doesn't tend to move too much. Just to highlight our debt position at 80.2, that's 20 million higher than what it was at the end of the financial year, but well within where we had anticipated it being at this point. Investments on the following page, likewise, there's no real movement on those given how they are valued and reported. Going to the KPIs, the two at the very top around bookings and community facilities and the revenue as a percentage of operating costs, both sitting with a red status currently. That's really has been the impact of COVID on those facilities, and as Denise had mentioned at a previous council meeting, there's some effort going in now to a marketing campaign to reinvigorate that sector and get the revenues flowing back up and the usage back up, which I think is more important. There's a few there sitting in amber, which we've just got a watching brief on those, some of those to do with numbers as we just discussed then. On the next page, the major red item here is our percentage of compliance with resource consent granting, building consent grants. As I said, it's a fairly negative position there, but the monthly movement is positive. And the other one, which we will always have as an amber or worse, is transportation around road safety. It's just, road to zero. Really want to see that improving. I'll happily take questions.
Thank you for that. Deborah.
Yes, thanks for the report. I have 3 questions. Page 70, regulatory, with the number of consents issued, 49%. Are we penalised at all for non-compliance with regards to not meeting the statutory timeframes in days?
No, we're not, but that also comes into play with our accreditation, which it's a factor across the whole sector at the moment, but there's no financial penalty.
Okay. Page 71, fees and charges. I note that they are 2.53 million higher than budgeted. Can they be adjusted, providing some relief for our ratepayers? Some of our ratepayers are really concerned about some of the fees and charges, especially in the regulatory area, with regards to costs.
No, because the other side of it, which referred to the increase in costs, are being offset by that increase in revenue. So if you pull the revenue back, we will be short as a council.
We'll be short as a council if we pull the revenue back.
Yes.
Okay.
So revenue's up, costs are up.
I realise that. Page 75, capital expenditure. Wow. Don't quite know where to start with this one. But look, I note that we've got a lot of carry forwards and we're continually carrying forward. Is it prudent that we start actually cutting our cloth to actually, meet the requirement? Because obviously, if we can't complete them, or we've got a whole lot of the majority of the projects just been started, we've got only a month for the end of the financial year. And that really, really worries me if we're carrying forward and we're still actually completing these projects and, you know, with a month to go, and we have going to have a lot more projects with all this growth that we've got on our books. And I really worry about the capacity to deliver and the timeframes that people will expect us to deliver. Have you got any comment on that? How do we manage that?
It's a great question. It's one we've posed a number of times here, that we have a tendency to fire in a lot of projects, and a lot of projects which come popping up through this group that we'll commit to. We are not resourced to be able to deliver it all. It's about having to prioritise and be quite prudent about where we go and how we go. More and more pops up.
And I just want to add to that, Deborah, that's one of those comments that we make every year through the draft annual plan process. And we also caution councillors who want to bring projects forward, because that also places additional pressure on the ability to deliver as well. You said we've got 1 month to go to the end of the year. Don't forget this is to the end of March, so we've actually got 3 months to spend what it is we've got left this year.
I think the other side of that, though, is every LGP and in your plan, we do ask the staff whether or not they can deliver what we're asking, and we get reassured that we can. So there's been issues this year around COVID, and there's been other issues around supply chain delays and things, because, we had put some extra conversation and pressure on this 12 months ago when we went through our long-term plan piece. It felt like improvements were going to be made in these 12 months. There are some things that are out of our hands, but just to balance your comments, David, I do think that we have sought that reassurance that we haven't gone too far with what we're requesting, and that the finances and capability were in hand to be able to deliver. Mark.
Thank you. A single question on page 72. We note the staff costs are favourable to budget by $1 million because we're approximately 10 FTE vacancies. What is the impact on the organisation of those vacancies? I mean, it's nice that we save money because we're not employing people, but is the impact in some of the other areas where we are underperforming because we haven't or can't fill those vacancies?
Potentially, it'll depend on where they are and when the vacancies have occurred. Typically the budget's formed up, and this is one of the weaknesses of an annual budget process is you wait to 1 July to start your recruitment, and it takes time to recruit. Therefore, it fills up over the period of the year, and rather than it being a continual cycle of moving forward, there are areas where there's really big challenges around filling roles, and we just talked about resource consenting and building consent officers are really, really difficult to get at the moment, and quality ones as well. We're in a very, very competitive market with independent organisations paying way above what we're paying, which is impacting us, and even Crown organisations paying well above what we're paying. And when I'm saying well above, this is thousands, tens of thousands above. It's not small items. The two things, there is a bit of a slowness in recruiting just with the way the budget processes go, but also a very, very tight labour market. And building consent's one area, IT staff, all of those sort of things are tight. Engineers, water engineers,
Shane.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. I hope no one's thinking about going anywhere when there's tens of thousands of dollars on offer, so please stay. Grant nailed it before, and if we're continually saying this year after year that we're under-resourced, we've got capital expenditure that we're behind on. Deborah's spoken about what did you speak about? Cutting our cloth accordingly. I think we actually should be looking the other way. We need to supersize our council, and if it's a matter of looking overseas or looking elsewhere to get that resource, then we've got a surplus, we've got the most growth, we've got huge ability, we've got interest in regional economic development, transport, we've got it all here. Instead of looking inwardly, we should be looking outwardly, right outwardly, and looking at supersizing our council for a supersized city. So I was going to drill down to it a whole lot of stuff, but it keeps coming back to that point around resource. You know, and the biggest worries here are the consenting, and you're doing a fantastic job too. So I mean, we're halfway there by the look of the report, and capital expenditure, and that's, you know, that's been consistent since the time I've been around. Anyway, we've always been behind. So we've got a CCO. You know, let the brakes off and let's go. Let's get this place going.
You can let the brakes off, but you got a resourcing issue and your contractors as well. So it's not quite as simple as letting the brakes off. We've got a immigration issue with borders being closed or just starting to reopen, and actually getting people to come in with working visas that are not essential is still really difficult to land. The supersizing of the council, I wouldn't call it supersizing, but the draft annual plan, which we all discussed and we'll discuss again next week, has a significant uplift in staff that we want to enable some of this to happen. So I think we're moving in the right direction. It's just holding firm on that. And once this border starts to open and we get the workforce back available to us, then we can start to move.
The one thing that we are conscious of, though, Shane, is the brain drain. You know, 18 to 30-year-olds have been denied the OE for what, 2.5 years. So we know that the borders will allow more to come in, but flip side, and this is just not a sector issue, it's a nation-wide thing, is how that's going to play out.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, and thanks for pushing back on that statement about project delivery. We do ask those questions every year. Look, Shane's largely nailed this. Well spoken, Shane. Understand, Kelvin, yes, there are constraints. We all know those constraints, but it's a chance for us to have those discussions. And you've mentioned annual plan, and it's appropriate we discuss them there, and also around audit and risk table. The bottom line, though, is if we change nothing, nothing changes. And what we've done is continued up until this point to deliver in the same way. I think it's time, as Shane has alluded to, it's time for us to think from a governance perspective about how we want these to be delivered, because the reality is this community continues to put pressures upon us as a council that we have to deliver. We can't just say we can't deliver the projects. We have to stop doing projects. The community demand those projects of us because that is what's required. We're already talking about earlier today the constraints of transportation and how we're going to solve that. And those problems are going to grow, not decrease. So no solutions here, and I don't expect us to have solutions here today. But what we do have to do is think about perhaps a different delivery model. So yeah, thank you. A comment rather than a question.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. Really clear paper and easy to understand. So thank you for that. It was really, really good. Just want a sort of word of caution, I suppose, that the average reader would say, wow, this is amazing. You know, you've got income 26 million over budget, you've got 23 million, there's a $50 million swing in your budget here. But really, when you look at the numbers, a huge part of that is our DC income. And just need to reiterate to our ratepayers that we're only holding on behalf that money. It's not money available for spending, because you would take by reading this that we were rolling in cash and we shouldn't be increasing our rates. And if you take that DC particularly out, and as you say, Kelvin, extrapolate the increase in fee income against increase in expenditure, it's not all quite as rosy as you'd think. Just reiterating, you know, you look at the investment column, $2.9 million over budget, which is great. Zero reinvestment. We should be held up against the wall for that. Page 76, Kelvin, a particular question. Our other receivables has gone from 3 to 9 million. Is there a specific driver of that?
There will be timing around some of the things that have been invoiced in the month. So it could have been.
It's not signalling a problem with collection.
No, it's not. No, it'll be a large DC. In sale of some of those lands will be a large one-off. Yeah, dealer position, which comes from the Treasury report, is in pretty good shape.
Okay. And lastly, I want to support Shane and Murray around what I'm looking for is not to say I hear the question, the problem we're having around delivery on our CapEx project, but we're looking for innovative solutions. And I think, you know, we've had feedback from our providers, our construction companies and our roading companies. They are open to innovation. And I suppose, you know, what we're looking for as a governance group is let's have a look at some of these innovations and see whether they can work. If they don't, well, let's go back to the original model.
Thanks for that. Are there further things that people would like to raise within this report? I think today there's been some discussion around the nature of having external advice into where we go, which I think's really valuable, because sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing that actually an external perspective is really helpful. But I also think we need to consider the long-term impacts of always looking outside of ourselves for the answers, and taking a more of an approach of thinking, how do we train the right people to be a part of our organisation that live and love our community, that can deliver from here, rather than just trying to buy in the expertise that we need from other places too. So there's always going to be a constant tension that we're asking David and the staff to recruit and bring people in. But we need a model that's sustainable for us going forward. And at the moment, local government right across New Zealand is really struggling with the retention and attraction of staff, and we're not isolated from that ourselves. Thankfully, we're bigger than many of the other councils in the South Island, and so some of the difficulties for them are felt in a much more acute way than what they are for us, but we're not immune to, I guess, the view of local government from New Zealand society at the moment, which is proving difficult for us.
Could I just draw back Grant's point around it? Yes, surplus large and that, but a lot of the staff increases that do come on hit the general rate. And our fund and approach to rating is we've taken the path down. We'll head heavily on targeted rates. That will have an impact when you do start to lift your staff, that you do have that general rate moving substantially. And whether that's a sustainable thing for the future and whether that's the right approach for the future, especially after a Three Waters movement, needs to be considered. So that'll be part of a future work stream.
Against? Declare it carried. The next item is the transportation report. And so welcome Andrew to the room. Graham to the other side. Graham, thank you. And before you present the report, I'll just say Grant raised some things earlier, and I think you were in the room for that. So if you want to just address how that might look through your presentation, that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, councillors. Yeah, there's a few things here I can, well, already in my report that I can touch on from the conversations earlier today and also just in the last few minutes or so. So starting with probably in terms of in my report, I referenced under the asset management section, transport activity, the fact that we part of the process to develop a Greater Christchurch transport plan and investment plan. And so the partners are working on that at the moment, and I will touch on that a little bit further down the track. But I just wanted to reference the fact that this is an ongoing bit of work which will inform the conversation a little bit more around what we've just been talking about and what Councillor Miller has been suggesting. But working through a few other aspects, public transport, and I made a reference in there regarding the fare review, and I think there's some good news that has just been circulated by Councillor Alexander on ECAN's proposals on that, which have you got it there, Mark?
Yeah, they have agreed, subject to their final adoption of their annual plan, for the $2 flat fare across the Greater Christchurch zones 1 and 2, with a $4 fare across zone 3, which is the rest of Selwyn, for those using Metro cards. So that's substantially what Selwyn submitted on the fare review. So that should be good news for our ratepayers and residents.
And also a $1 concession fare, isn't it? So yes, a good result there. It's not, as I say, everything we asked for, but I think it's a very good compromise in terms of the position going forward and hopefully encouraging further public transport use, which is all a good thing at the moment. The other aspect is I touched there on the fact that the Regional Transport Committee is meeting tomorrow afternoon, And on the agenda for that will be a staff report from ECAN talking about the role of interregional passenger services. So we can, no doubt, Mayor Sam will be looking at that in detail, and we can report back on that from that meeting. Attached to the report in Appendix A is the RTC submission on the future of road user charges. So that's just attached for your information. And I suppose in terms of my section there around talking about the plan change requests, we've now sort of embarked on looking at the future urban development areas in terms of our own work within council, and getting that sort of lined up for in regards to the variation to the proposed district plan that needs to be progressed later in the year. But I think the telling comment or the statement that I have under section 4.3 is along the lines, the development of council's transport upgrade programs to inform the 24-34 long-term plan will have to give to effect the resulting stipulated and Sudbury plan change transport requirements in conjunction with the developer obligations. So what I'm basically saying is that through all these plan changes that we've been working through, private plan changes, there's a whole heap of probably commitments is probably the best word that are coming out of that in regards to what council has to work through to give effect to those plan changes from beyond what we've been able to get the developers to undertake and fund. And that ranges from intersection upgrades to a whole various things in terms of also walking and cycling connections and what have you. So what we're faced with going forward is basically needing to gather all that information up and work out our plan of attack to give effect and meet our obligations around those private plan changes. And I suppose 2 years ago, we would have all been sitting here and had absolutely no idea that we were going to be faced with in this regard. And so it has been a game changer, and it will be taking quite a bit of time and resource to get all this worked out and dialed in for the 2024 long-term plan process. So in terms of Councillor Miller's comments, we've got that all already now sort of in play, where there's been a lot of work that's been done in terms of developing transport evidence for those plan changes. And so we have a very good idea where we need to focus our attention going forward. So there's that aspect. And as I said, I come back to the comment around the Greater Christchurch development of Greater Christchurch Transport Plan and investment program, which will also look at this on a wider Greater Christchurch perspective in regards to how we manage for growth going forward and how we shift towards a more multimodal solution to managing that growth. Of course, that's also referenced in with the 2050 spatial plan work as well. So there's a lot going on and a lot that we have to get a grip on and basically work out how we're going to take this forward. And so I think there's plenty of that aspect of that information out there already that we just need to work through on. In regards to the Rolleston State Highway 1 access upgrade project, well, we had a good discussion with Wakatahi this morning on that. And so I think that the team really valued the comments that were made and have got a few other things to just catch up on and work through before the engagement process. So that's been very valuable. Thank you. But I believe, as I said, we're in a position now we have to move on and get cracking on that as well. The West Melton State Highway 73 traffic signals, I understand that Wakatahi is in the process of close to awarding a construction contract for that, which we had a steering group or a project group meeting yesterday on that, which Councillor Nicole Reid was involved in. And so that's progressing very well. And by the sounds of the fact, if they are close to awarding a construction contract, means that they must be putting all the right ticks in the boxes to make it happen. The Prebbleton arterial intersection upgrades, and thank you very much for your consideration of the acquisition report earlier. Just to elaborate a little bit further on that, certainly what we've been doing is getting out there and talking to the affected property owners, over the last month or so. And those discussions have gone as well as you probably can expect in these type of situations. I think in terms of options, where we have actually developed our options over the last, or investigated our options over the last probably 18 months. And those options that are in the report, I think on pages 62 and 63 of your agenda, pretty much reflect where we had to get to in terms of being able to then take this forward to say, right, oh, we need this amount of land and this is what we need to discuss with you, Mr. Landowner. But the point is that we have been very clear when we've been talking with those landowners that we have said that, look, this is a concept design at the moment. We are in the process of engaging detailed designers who will be working through all this with a fine-tooth comb. And there will be hopefully opportunities, if we can, to tweak things and juggle things around to hopefully mitigate some concerns. But in terms of sort of in regards to a wholesale, well, we're going to start from ground zero again, that's not where we're at. And we need to move forward again on the basis that of building on all this work that we've already done. And certainly, I think the other comment I can make is that we also need to keep Wakatahahi engaged in the process as we go along, and they've also provided input and comment on how we've progressed our concept designs and our funding on that basis in regards to they can see that we've worked through a process on that. But as I said, we're open to being able to discuss with landowners further on how we can best mitigate their concerns. The Wakatahahi Streets for People initiative, well, I think we've talked about that in terms of the disappointment on how that's evolved. But we are still engaging with Wakatahahi in regards to how this may progress, but in a different way in terms of potentially informing the 2024 long-term plan process. Those discussions will be going on for a while yet, but and don't hold your breath, but we are still trying to explore all avenues on that further to that declining on the Streets for People initiative. I also have referenced in there we made that submission on the State Highway 75 Christchurch to Akaroa speed limit proposals, and I referenced in there their decision on that, which is essentially dropping all the existing 100 km/h speed limits between Horswell and Little River to 80 k's, and pretty much 60 k's for everything else from Little River to Akaroa. So that wasn't in line with what we had submitted on, and I suppose perhaps a little bit disappointed that they didn't take the opportunity to talk to Council directly in regards to its submission, considering that a large length of State Highway 75 goes through our district. And furthermore, just as I alluded to before, that work that's going on in the Greater Christchurch Partnership around developing the Greater Christchurch Transport Plan and all those other aspects around PT Futures and 2050 spatial planning. So there's a lot of wheels in motion in terms of trying to get to grips with this whole aspect of dealing with integrated land use and transport management in terms of the Greater Christchurch area, which again, I hope goes some way to answer Councillor Miller's question that we are actually trying to work this stuff out, but it's a complicated process. And probably the only other thing was the councillor requests in terms of the information that we've just got recently from Wakatahahi, that a response to our letter regarding state highway reviews is pending. So that's good, and we'll see what that has to say for itself when it comes in.
Thank you. And are there questions on this part of the report that people would like to raise now? Yeah, Grant.
Firstly, I want to thank you, Andrew, for your understated response to Wakatahahi about State Highway 75. My community is absolutely ropeable with the outcome. They have submitted in good faith. Their impression is it's been predetermined from the start, and NZTA has just abrogated its duty as a state highway provider. They have gone for the cheapest solution, not the best solution. And again, it really restricted the arterial flow from Selwyn and the peninsula into Christchurch. And they just keep their head down and keep doing this stuff. And we're not, and as you say, Andrew, perhaps you're constrained by being staff. I don't feel the same constraints. I can live and vent. I just think it's not good enough they didn't ring you. A detailed submission from Selwyn, the largest stakeholder in the district, and you get a generic email reply. It's just not good enough. And I don't know how we reflect that back, but it's from you, Sam, writing to NZTA. particularly around the state highway program to suggest roads within Selwyn should be reclassified. I think we should not wait for that letter. I think we should front foot it and send them a list of letters of roads that we consider should be reclassified. So we've got a window of 2 days here. Let's use that wisely and fly that letter off, because I almost guarantee what's in that letter without reading it. I've got a pretty good idea, and it won't be what we want to hear. So particularly, you talked about GCP partners, Andrew, and again, you're being kind. I drove over the Shands Road Bridge today, and dear old Christchurch, they've done 2 laning on the Christchurch side, and all of a sudden, as soon as we get into the city, they've down put it to 1 lane. So it's that talking in one sense of partnership in GCP, but you constrain traffic from Selwyn easily accessing the city. And you built a brand new road, which is from day one, is not fit for purpose. So again, those sort of things we can't let slide, because this whole GCP is failing us, if that's the solution that Christchurch is providing. We've got a new subdivision being built in Horswell, which will be on State Highway 75. 2 new roundabouts are to be built. There's no engagement much with Andrew about how we get Ellesmere Road connecting into that with Christchurch and the NZTA. So again, there's a whole lot of issues which are flying under the radar. On a positive note, I want to thank Graham publicly for your pragmatic approach to Ahuriri Road. It showed light and day the difference between Christchurch and Selwyn District Council around how you can get things done at Selwyn and you can't at Christchurch, because theirs was a very convoluted, slow, difficult process. Our process was talking to Graham and actually getting some action. So well done, Graham, and thanks for your assistance.
Thanks, Graham, for that. If there are any follow-up comments you want to make, I'll get councillors to make them, and then Andrew will circle back to you and then have Graham's report. Bob, and then Deborah.
Yeah. Just a small thing, but in the new footpath connections in Colgate, they're doing the footpath, and it actually, when they were working on it, it ended up 2 houses away from tying in with the local walkway cycleway. And talking to Tony on the job, and said, this seems a bit strange that we're not completing it. And also there was another area that flooded that needed a soak. But I was just wondering, on some of these smaller jobs, they possibly have come to council with where they are, but it would be really nice to have a map or something of it for the councillor, so I could have looked at it beforehand, and I might have done months ago, I don't know, but that, to me, it's really important, because people were saying, why are they only going that far? And obviously, I really thank Tony and all you for the work you've done. And when we discussed it, of actually extending it and putting the soak bit in. So it's just a little bit of misunderstanding, I think.
We'll cover that when we get round to some good comments. And Deborah, do you have something you wanted to raise now?
Yes, I did. Just like to thank staff for the installation of the speed indicators for Springston. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for managing to complete that work. And the other thing too is, and I've had communication with Andrew, the Goulds Road Leaston intersection safety upgrade. I've been made aware of another couple of minor accidents just recently in the last couple of weeks. You can still see some of the damage on the side of the road from one of the vehicles. And just pleased to see that it is being started with its design stage. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Deborah. If you want to comment on any of those things, Andrew or Graham, and then Graham will move through your report.
Afternoon all. Things are progressing well. Most projects nearing completion. The Whedon's Ross Road seal widening is well underway. Completion in July. Goulds Road, Leaston Road intersection. Some property acquisition is being investigated. It's progressing. School frontages are design and safety audit stage. The Prevelton intersection upgrade stage 2. Professional services tenders closed and attributes are being evaluated. Rolleston Drive, Tennyson Street traffic signals was commissioned. Just waiting on some luminaires to complete the street lighting aspect there, and also some line marking, which can only be done when it warms up. The new footpath connections, yeah, they're working in Colgate, and I'll raise that issue with them. The road safety updates, the winter safety strategy is about to commence, and that's me.
Any questions on that part of the report? Yes, Sophie and then Mark.
Oh, Nicole,
No, I'll go after.
okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether it's something to answer straight away or later. There's been a lot of discussion around parking around Foster Park. And I was wondering whether it would be possible for the road safety team to consider working with sports clubs around some sort of transport demand management and carpooling, or much like they do with schools, just because there's basically, unless we build them a multi-storey car park or pave over a football field, I'm not sure we're going to survive the winter. But there must be more options available than catering to peak car parking. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a number of teams working on that, and I think Douglas would be able to make.
Yeah, so we obviously we were sealing today and yesterday our Foster Park car park, which is about 200 car parks in it. So we're currently down 200. It's important to note. We've put that hopefully enough on social media. So between Graham's team, compliance and the council property team, we are doing visits to Foster Park over the last few weekends. We're focusing on 2 or 3 things, making sure cars are not parked in the wrong places. So we're making some slight adjustments to where cars are parking on mounds. That's not too big a deal. We're turning a blind eye to cars parking on the SAC, what I call the SAC swale area in the front, but we're about to put some bollards to improve that intersection, stop people driving off the roundabout. They can go around the back. We've opened up the piece on 100 Broadlands Drive as temporary overflow car parking as well. We've left some cones in on Dines Road to get around a sticky issue with compliance. And finally, the enforcement side with car park ticketing. That's being brought through as quickly as we can to resolve that. What as staff, we're looking at again the weekend after Queen's birthday. So one more weekend this weekend. We hope to have Foster open this weekend. We'll advertise that obviously widely. Queen's birthday weekend, we'll have a reasonably slow car park need, and then we'll look really hard at the following weekend to see where we're at. So we are monitoring at the weekends because that's the key issue. We also know there's 1 or 2 night issues, but we'll get the Foster Park car parking open. There's one we flag I just want to mention, so we're on the same page. And this is the challenge of spending money. Despite ordering all the street lights, they are incredibly delayed, and that's not just this project. So the street lights in that car park won't be until I think it's early August. And so there will be some pushback from people that it's not so well lit through there. We have to be really careful at night with people in there. So in terms of safety, so yeah, that's the current. But we are to council over look at it.
Thank you. Back to Mark.
Thank you. On the car parking issue, there's also an unrealistic expectation in our community that how close they are going to be able to park to any of our grounds at peak usage. We need to push back to a certain extent and say, look, it's not unreasonable for you to have to walk 3 or 4 minutes to the ground to stand and watch your child play sport for an hour. Unless there seems to be an expectation that every parent should be able to park next to the ground at peak time. We're never going to deliver on that. I think we have to be front-footing that with our community. That is an unrealistic expectation. And while we can improve what we've got, we're never going to provide an equivalent amount of parking for that. I've asked parents, how many sports grounds would you like to give up so that you can park on Foster Park? The answer generally is 0, but I want to park. So I think we have to manage that expectation. The community seem to have a very entitled view of what is reasonable. And I think it's fair on us to say we will provide as many as is reasonable, but your expectations are unreasonable and unrealistic and unaffordable. Because otherwise we'll be providing at the large-scale park, we'll be providing 50 hectares of grounds and 50 hectares of car parking, and I think that is totally unreasonable. My comment was more on the traffic management stuff, Graham, about how we check that the contractors putting stuff out actually know our speed limits. I had calls this week to stop on Tennyson Street in the middle of our 30k zone where a contractor had put out at the end of the workspace a 50k speed limit sign in our 30k zone that we were struggling to get people to slow down to 50k. Here they were putting a 50k speed sign up, and the contractors doing it weren't at all interested in correcting it. They said that's what the office said to do. So how do we check that the people doing these temporary traffic plans actually know what the zones are that they're putting signs in? I took one phone call here to get it fixed, but it just made it very difficult when the police are working very diligently to enforce that 30k zone. To have a contractor put a 50k speed limit sign in the middle of the zone is just so frustrating and such a nonsense. But I must also acknowledge on that our police have been working very diligently in that zone to try to bring people's attention to the 30k speed limit, and that I was surprised and disappointed that having had the signs up for several months, that most of our community still don't seem to realise that whole block is 30k. I just wonder, as a council, what more we can do to inform our community that speed limits have changed. But otherwise, great report, great work. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we were talking, Grant's brought up about the pace of change that we had in our district, and in the transportation report, we're obviously talking about plan changes again. And with that, is what I've brought up before, is about the roading transportation chapter of the engineering code of practice. It's still sitting at 2012 version, and I'm wanting if we can have on the matters of investigation on a date of when we're actually going to get that come to us. I mean, that's 10 years.
Yeah, is that the one that were previously advised as being updated and more?
It is, and Murray can talk further to that, but I just, and to the point now, I want this on the matters for investigation. I think it's quite important that we have this all finalised and actually comes to council. So
look, with the code of practice, we're trying to move away from obviously the link to the district plan to have a code of practice that's updated as we go. And so the implementation of the current, it's not a 2012 standard we're applying, it's applying what we're currently doing in conjunction with the developers. In the last couple of months, we've just had a few issues with staff changes and pace and volume of work, and we've realised there's still a wee bit of updates to do. So we're proposing we'll bring it to the end of July, the second meeting of July. Okay.
And we'll note it on the matters under investigation. Thank you. Mover and seconder for this report, Malcolm and Jenny, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. Thanks, Graham and Andrew. The next item is council transaction updates. And Douglas, welcome to the front of the room.
I'd just like to just note one of the sort of slightly right things being underspent on capital and property. We actually bought one of the projects 2.3 million under budget, so we can't spend it anyway. So it's actually a bit of a plus. Just a thought. Civil stage 2 civils in Royston Town Centre. So the public sector property matters, nothing probably that I can add greatly to what's on the report, Your Worship. So really just probably have to take any questions that come.
Great, thank you. Mark.
Not so much a question as a bouquet. Philip Miller came to the Royston Residents Association on Monday night, give a presentation on the town centre and youth space. Great presentation. We're very well received, and just a thank you to the team and to Phil for doing that. It's the community really appreciates being kept in the loop and kept up to date.
Actually, can I add to that? Because it was actually on the Friday that Phil was asked to come for a Monday night meeting. So I think that I totally second what Mark was saying, and I mean, that's a very short time frame for him to have done it. So, thank you.
Great. Mark, if you're going to fill out a staff shout out for it, would be good to be acknowledged within the organisation, and we can acknowledge that at the next council meeting with a sweet bar of chocolate as well. I think it's really good to highlight staff, and they've done great things like that for us. Grant.
In the same vein, I drove past the new Prebbleton Park this morning, looking really great. So, yes, some good work being done.
Douglas, thank you for this update, and there's other matters in your PX report, which we'll get to in due course. A mover and seconder for this report. Mark, thank you, Jeff. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. And that brings us to the end of the public portion of this meeting. So just ask for a resolution now to be passed to move to PX. Bob and Malcolm, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. And we'll just